Welcome back into A to Z here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. I am Mark Zinno. Make sure you guys give us a follow at Mark Zinno and at Locked On ATL. Keep up with the show. Let us know what you think so far. Continuing to grow this following here. So many great shows on this platform. Not only A to Z, but Hitting Hard with John Chuckery, ATL Day Ones with Tanitra Batiste and Jarvis Davis. And of course, all of our other Locked On shows, including Locked On Hawks. We had Brad Rowland on earlier in the week. We're going to talk to Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons here in a moment. Don't forget about Grant McCauley's Braves postcast after every Braves postgame. We've got so many great contributors here, and we just appreciate you guys being part of Locked On Sports Atlanta and certainly having a lot of fun with us. All right, let's turn our attention to the Atlanta Falcons once again. As I have opined over the past couple of days and weeks about the draft strategy for the Falcons going forward, let's welcome him in from Locked On Falcons. It is Aaron Freeman joining us here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Aaron, welcome. And how are you, sir? Let me make sure I get this all figured out. And I don't have it figured out. Hang on. What did I do? I'm so bad at this. All right, you start and I'll figure this out. So let's do this. Plain and simple. Where should the Falcons go at 8 in your opinion?
I think they probably need to go back to what their seemingly original plan was that they had as recent as this year's combine, where Arthur Smith sort of publicly was saying to all the media people that were asking him about their rebuild strategy, which is build up the roster and then go get a quarterback. I certainly understand the desire for the team to address what is the most glaring potential issue on the team, which is, who's going to inherit the title of Matt Ryan at the top of this draft. But, I think both you and I probably agree that the Falcons are not going to be particularly good. Next year's quarterback class is going to be stronger. So I think you need to start building up this roster for that eventuality when you do go get your franchise quarterback potentially at the top of next year's draft. So I would personally love to see the Falcons get a pass rusher. We've been clamoring for the fact that the Falcons do not have a functional pass rush for seemingly decades now at this point in time. And so getting one of these top edge rushers in this sort of edge rush heavy draft class feels too good to pass up. And I think you'll probably be able to get one of the 4 to 5 top edge rushers at 8, regardless of how the first 7 picks go.
All right, let's talk about where we agree. One, you're not going to be very good this year. And whether you want to acknowledge it or not, this isn't year 1 of the rebuild. This is like year 0. Next year is year 1 when you get all the salary cap money free. You have $77 million in cap space, no dead cap, and you can actually start to construct and reconstruct the roster. So this year actually doesn't count towards the rebuild. So whatever it is, it is. I agree that there are multiple holes in the roster that they need to address. I will say that you're not going to get me off the point of whenever you're doing a rebuild, you have to start at the quarterback position. Like, you can't rebuild a team without a quarterback. Look at the Washington Commanders. They've built an entire roster, and the best they could do is go 7-8-1 and start Taylor Heineke in a playoff game to lose to the Buccaneers. Like, it's just not the Colts, I didn't even want to say they're an exception because they went from Andrew Luck, and once he retired, they had a bridge year with Jacoby Brissett where they didn't know what they were doing because it was so sudden. And then you could plug the quarterback in. But again, they built around Andrew Luck first. I mean, the Dolphins, even them, they decided it was Tua and got him first and put him in there, even though Ryan Fitzpatrick, I guess, was supposed to start. But they addressed the quarterback at the top. I don't think the Falcons should be afraid to do what the Arizona Cardinals did. If Malik Willis is there and you like him, draft him. Throw him to the Wolves and see if he can play. And if he can't, guess what? Go draft another one next year. Like, that's totally okay. Like, it's not against the rules. And the idea that you have to draft a quarterback and stick with them is silly. And you're going to go, why are you going to draft the quarterback? There's no offensive line. He's not going to be able to be any good. Guess what? Joe Burrow didn't have that either. But you could see he could play. Like, it's not that hard to know who can play and who can't. Joe Burrow made them competitive. They didn't win games, but he made them competitive, and that's all you're asking the quarterback to do.
I hear you on that, Zinno. I don't think you're wrong, but I just don't think that's how NFL teams operate. That the idea of we're going to take a quarterback at 8 this year and we're not married to that guy. You look at the Cardinals, what they did as you say, with Josh Rosen with a top 10 pick in 2018, and then having the number 1 pick in 2019 and taking Kyler Murray. But a big part of why they were willing to move on from Josh Rosen is because they made a coaching change.
Coaching change, yes, 100% fair point. Yes,
we know that NFL teams just. I hear you. You're absolutely right. You potentially, the hit rate on quarterbacks is so low in the NFL, and taking 2 swings at it makes total sense to maximize your chances of finding that guy. But we just know that if the Falcons or really any team go out there and draft a quarterback, particularly in the top 10 of a draft, they're married to that guy for at least 2, if not 3 or more years. And the only way that really you see teams that, go in a different direction is when somebody gets fired. And, that may, I'm sure some people might welcome that, but
no, I don't think firing Arthur Smith is the right move at this point in time. And he has to be comfortable with his guy that he chooses, right? But we all know Marcus Mariota is not the long-term solution. And the real question is how long do you want to wait? If this is year 0, there's no better year to draft a quarterback and let him play the first 5 or 6 games and see what he can do. And if he can't, Mariota finishes out the season, and then you can move on. But in the same respect, it's just like one of those things where you're going to waste a year of the rookie quarterback when you take him next year. And the only guarantee you have, Aaron, in waiting till next year is if you guarantee yourself the number 1 overall pick and you tank, right? Because there's always something that could change. If a quarterback is that good and that highly touted, if it's Bryce Young or whoever it is, right? If you're not the number 1 pick, guess what? You have no guarantee. Somebody can jump in front of you. And that's the risk you're going to run.
Yeah, there's no clean solution, right? It's one of those things where you could wait on a quarterback and take one on day 2. I know you don't necessarily love that idea because you're not getting a franchise quarterback. You're giving yourself at least an option. Maybe you find a Jalen Hurts, maybe you find a Jimmy Garoppolo, that in the event that you don't stink hard enough this upcoming season to get that number 1 pick or that number 2 pick, where, I think most people look at it as a 2 quarterback race at the top of next year's draft. We'll see how that changes over the next, year. But, you need to give yourself an option. And it's hard in the situation that the Falcons find themselves in, where you're either basically going all in on getting that quarterback next year, or getting your guy this year and hoping for the best. But the reason why I have a hard time buying into the notion of getting that guy today is we see this time and time again in the NFL, where you put these quarterbacks in these bad situations, and the Falcons are not a great situation right now. And we know how that goes. It's very rare where a quarterback's going to come through that better. We look at, say, last year's quarterback class where you had 5 quarterbacks. Is it a surprise to us that Mac Jones was the best when he went to a team that had a top 10 running game, a top 10 offensive line, and a top 5 defense, and the rest of these guys stink? Is it going to be a surprise to us if Trey Lance emerges as the 49er starter and is the second or first most effective quarterback among that quarterback class because he goes to a team in San Francisco that has a running game and a defense? You don't have any of those factors in Atlanta, and I just feel like getting a quarterback now and throwing him to the Wolves, we know how that turns out 9 times out of 10. And you're basically betting on whether it's Malik Willis or Kenny Pickett or Desmond Ridder. You're betting on that guy being the sort of exception to the rule. And I just don't think that's a great bet. So it's not an ideal situation. It goes back to a conversation you and I had a year ago when it came to that draft, where we both were in agreement, and that we don't always agree on a lot of things, but sometimes we do.
And the rare time we were, man, we struck out.
So it's one of those things where, like, you feel like a lot of headaches would have been avoided had the Falcons had maybe that clarity of vision that you were talking about a year ago. But now they're just kind of making the best of a bad situation. And I just don't feel like taking a quarterback at the top of this draft class is making that situation better. I just feel like you're acting a little bit out of desperation, but sort of to see how the team
I 100% agree, right? I am lusting after a quarterback because I know you need to get that position solved. Like it is step 1 in the process. On page 1 of Rebuilding an NFL Franchise 101 for Dummies, like it says, get a quarterback, right? Like, so, and I understand it. And I've said this repeatedly. If you're not taking a quarterback, those other 3 guys, whether it's Pickett, Ridder, Corral, whoever it is, all those other quarterbacks at the top, they better stink. They better stink, because if one of those guys turns out to be something, on him. If somebody takes him at 9 or 10 and you passed on him, they're down. They're never going to live it down unless they get it right the following year. And that is a miss on your draft record, right? That you let a guy go. I'll use the perfect example. The New York Giants decided Odell Beckham Jr. over Aaron Donald. I still throw up my mouth every time I have to say that out loud as a Giants fan. Guess what? Yeah, they got it wrong. And Aaron Donald is the best defensive player and will end up in the Hall of Fame one day. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. When you make like 7 straight All Pros, you're going to end up in the Hall of Fame. But, that's the kind of stuff that I think will hurt you overall. And I do want to go back, and I think this bears repeating because I want to ask you about wide receivers in a minute. But when we talked about this last year, you and I were of the idea that, it was time to go get a quarterback and figure out the heir apparent. Because the situation with Matt Ryan was always on the table, whether you wanted to acknowledge it or not. There was always going to be like this whole Falcon for life crap that the owner spit out of his mouth and just destroyed. To me, it was ill-prepared. And really, I'm more mad for Falcons fans that they weren't smart enough to move off of Matt Ryan when the new regime came in. Just like you talked about with the Arizona Cardinals. You got a new GM, you got a new head coach, new quarterback, usher, everybody in at the same time. That was when it should have been done. And that's not a knock on Ryan. It was a business decision. Then it would have been a business decision. Now it was, you went after a guy, slipped and fell, stuck your foot in your mouth, and you had no other option. Like, that's why you got rid of Matt Ryan. I don't care what anybody says. That's how that whole thing went down. So, if you had that guy from last year, you wouldn't feel like Falcons fans feel right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. You're right. It was never about Matt Ryan. It was about, this is a new era of Falcons football. We spent the last 4 years with Dan Quinn trying to redeem that Super Bowl loss, try to win one with Matt Ryan. We weren't able to pull that off. It's not that Matt Ryan is incapable of doing that. It's just the Falcons became a situation that it was just not going to work long term, and trying to redeem that and get that back, just to me, just did not make a lot of sense for this new regime. It was time to sort of start all over and start this rebuild and get your guy. You had a potential number of really quality quarterbacks fall into your lap, and that's the hardest position to fill on the football team. It's the hardest position to find. And you had really talented players, certainly most people would agree more talented than you have this year, fall into your lap. And it's just too good an opportunity to pass up. And then, even if that guy wound up sitting last year, even if that guy came in to this season with not a whole lot around him, as we're seeing is the case with Marcus Mariota or Matt Ryan or whoever would be the Falcons quarterback, at least you feel like we got the most important position on the football field secure. Mm-hmm. And now we can go out there and rebuild the rest of this roster. And it made all the sense in the world. You and I thought so.
Yep.
Clearly the people in Flowery Branch did not necessarily think so.
And again, the bigger thing, like, he would have had a year under his belt. He would have had this system down. He would have been throwing to some of these other low budget wide receivers in practice that, nobody knows of. There's just so many advantages to doing it. And I genuinely feel like they missed a really big opportunity. But, people will tell you and I that we're being, it's revisionist history when we were the ones screaming a year ago to do it. But nonetheless, we digress. Back to this year and the draft. I would like to know the level of nausea and vomitousness you will have if the Falcons take a wide receiver at 8 overall.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying it now for a couple of weeks now. I like these wide receivers, but you can't start your rebuild with a wide receiver. A wide receiver is not a foundational piece of your offense or your team, right? Wide receivers are essentially, as I term it, mercenaries, right? You go out there and you get the guy that's going to take your offense to that next level, but you need to establish a foundation for your offense first. That starts with a quarterback, that starts with an offensive line, that starts with a running game, and then on the defensive side of the ball, you need to get stops and then go get your wide receiver. And we see some of these teams like Buffalo, really sort of laying their foundation with Josh Allen, a great defense, and then getting Stephon Diggs. We saw this with the Falcons, more than a decade ago when they had Matt Ryan, they had Michael Turner, they had, a solid defense, not a great defense, but a solid enough defense to get you into the postseason. And then you go get Julio Jones. And so, like, the idea of the Falcons going back-to-back years without any of these other issues that we're talking about, quarterback, a running game, no offensive line, no defense, to go
take 2 elite pass catchers in the top 10, it's my God, shoot me in the face.
It would make me sick to my stomach. I usually try to give the team the benefit of the doubt because we never know how these players turn out in the future. We always look back 3 to 5 years and say, oh, that guy that we thought was going to be a star, he stinks. That guy that we thought nobody thought was going to be good, he's a star. But that to me is just a very bad process. Even if the Falcons do wind up getting a really good wide receiver in this draft class, how much is that going to help your roster if you don't have a quarterback, if you don't have a running game, if you can't pass protect, and you can't play defense? Wide receivers don't really help you in that. If you have all those things, if you check all those boxes, a wide receiver can be immensely beneficial to you and help you take that next step, but it's not the foundation piece for a rebuild.
And to me, it says like you've learned nothing from the previous organization's failures. Stop being finesse. Stop being flash on the outside. Like figure out something, the core way to make your team better. And I said this yesterday on the show, was that, because the Falcons had no money in free agency to spend, they were just shopping in the discount barrel. You really couldn't get an idea of what the identity they wanted this team to be like. You're going to be able to tell that from this draft pick because it's the biggest, most major move that they have. And I hope that it is a foundational. You can even argue to me to go take one of the best tackles in this draft at 8. Get rid of McGarry and move him. I don't know. It's not easy to move guys inside. We always say that, like, just movement. No, it doesn't work that way. Sometimes guys who can't play tackle can't play guard either. But regardless, trade him, get rid of him. Go get me Eke Mikwanu, and he could play right tackle for a year, and then you can unload Jake Matthews and move him over to left. Like that's the most natural transition for tackles in the NFL. That's how you build a team long term. And if you're going to draft a quarterback next year, you damn well better make sure you have a left tackle that pairs with him for the better part of 5 years. So there's a lot of options out there for him, just not wide receiver. Please, like, for the love of all that's holy, don't make me throw things on behalf of Falcons fans. That's all I'm saying, Aaron.
Well, I'll be throwing them too. So I'll have to get a new computer, a new television, all that stuff. They take a wide receiver.
Make sure you guys follow him on Twitter at FalcFans, FalcFans. Check out Locked On Falcons podcast with the host, Aaron Freeman. Thanks for the time, brother. I appreciate it, man. This is great. We're going to do this again as we get closer to the draft. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.